In this video, I'm going to show you two ways to make scrunchies. We're going to be making them in silk because of the benefit that silk has for your hair. It can prevent frizz and hair breakage, and it's definitely worth spending the extra. Other than your fabric, you're going to need a hand sewing needle, a sewing machine needle, and elastic. The first way is going to be using already existing elastics. The second is going to be using a strand of elastic. Choosing different thicknesses and stretch to your elastic is a preference and can actually make a big difference in the outcome of your scrunchie. If you're cutting a strand of elastic, you can use an existing elastic as a benchmark for the length, or you can just wrap it around your wrist and see what fits comfortably. Always start by ironing out your fabric. I'm going to make 4 different scrunchies of different lengths and widths so you guys can see the difference that these measurements make. And these are the measurements that I cut. The first scrunchie is with the strip of elastic. We're going to start by placing right sides together and sew along the length. You're then going to trim away the excess fabric. Because we're using silk, we're going to make sure to finish our edges with a zigzag stitch. As you can see, the needle's going off one side of the fabric, which then creates a nice edge that avoids fraying. The next step is to flip the tube we just created right side out. I usually use an old sewing machine needle for this step because of the rounded edge. It allows me to poke it through the fabric without it catching. I make sure to poke my needle through the seam allowance so it doesn't leave a hole in the actual fabric. And now I'm ready to poke my rounded edge through the tube. This process can take a long time, but it's important to be patient so that you don't break your thread. You can now detach the needle and attach it to your piece of elastic. And you're going to do the same method by poking the rounded edge of the needle through the tube. Make sure you're holding the other end of the elastic so it doesn't get pulled through. At the end, you should be able to attach the 2 ends of the elastic with a pin. And now with a wide zigzag stitch with a short length, we're going to attach the 2 ends of the elastic. I then use the reverse button on the sewing machine to go back and forth to make sure the stitch is strong. The final step is using a hand needle to close up the edges. You're then going to fold in your seam allowance and hand sew along the edges. Again, you're making sure that both sides of your seam allowance are tucked in as you sew. To finish it off, tie 2 knots and trim your thread. Next, we're going to be making our scrunchie with an already existing elastic. Placing the right sides together, we're going to attach the fabric with a pin with the elastic in between. We're then going to carefully sew with a straight stitch the fabric, making sure not to catch the elastic. It helps to tug on the elastic slightly to create space. And now, like with the other one, we're going to sew a zigzag stitch to finish off the edge. And again, like with the other one, we're going to use our rounded needle to flip the fabric right side out, making sure to attach the needle to the seam allowance. Poking the rounded edge in and gently pulling the needle through. And then detach your needle when you're all done. And then finally, you're going to tuck in your seam allowance and sew again with your hand needle. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, please subscribe.